Greetings, loyal subjects of the Imperium of Man. I am Librarian Elias of the Adeptus Astartes. I am creating a series of recordings with the intent of educating the general populace of the dangers of the galaxy. All of this information comes from the Lexicanum, provided to me by the Adeptus Mechanicus. I will be reading verbatim from their archives. This recording will cover one of the many foes the Imperium faces. Primarch of the 16th Legion, the traitor, Horus Lupercal. Horus Lupercal was one of the 20 Primarchs created by the Emperor in the earliest days of the Imperium, just after the end of the Aegis strife. Like the other Primarchs, Horus was scattered from Terra by the gods of chaos and was placed on a faraway world in an attempt to prevent the coming of the Age of the Imperium. Traditional accounts state that Horus was the first Primarch to be rediscovered, fighting alongside his father in the Great Crusade as Lord of the Lunar Wolves. Becoming the favored son of the Emperor and beloved by most of his brother Primarchs, Horus eventually rose to become War Master of the Great Crusade and was seen as second only to the Emperor himself in power and prestige. But in spite of all of this, he was eventually corrupted by the powers of chaos and initiated the Horus Heresy against the very Imperium he helped create. When Horus was scattered, his pod landed on the world of Chthoniya, a planet close to the Sol System. He was discovered by the Chthonian gang overlord Kageddon and was given the known name of Nergui. Growing up for a time under Kageddon's gang, Nergui engaged in the perpetual gang warfare beneath Chthoniya's surface that dominated the world. However, his life changed dramatically when he came upon the pod he had arrived to Chthoniya on, now being excavated by the Mechanicum. Nergui engaged in battle with the tech priests, killing one and recovering its weapon before running back to Kageddon. Kageddon scolded Nergui for his recklessness, saying those he killed would chase them back to their tribal lair. Kageddon refused to give Nergui his kill name over the incident, much to the younger gangster's anger. However, just as Kageddon predicted, Mechanicum adepts arrived in their tribal hold and began to dig through it from the surface. With the chamber collapsing around them and most of the gang dying, Kageddon instructed Nergui to slay him to earn his kill name. After Nergui performed the act, he suddenly gained buried memories of the galaxy, technology, and himself. Even his body began to swell, seemingly awakened by a trigger. When the tech priests finally arrived to the chamber, a Primarch stood before them. Nergui proclaimed himself Horus. According to Horus himself, after his discovery, he was brought from Chthoniya to Terra alongside several of his elderly comrades from the gang world. He landed upon Terra to much fanfare, kneeling before the Emperor and taking an oath to serve him dutifully. This account, however, is sometimes disputed, with others claiming Horus returned to Terra itself. Because of his early discovery, Horus grew to be the most powerful among the Primarchs, as he had grown up from a child to an adult at the side of the Emperor. For 30 years, he was the only Primarch to have been discovered. Friendship between the Emperor and Horus grew rapidly, and the Emperor eventually trusted him enough to give him command of the entire force of the Imperium. The Emperor had saved Horus's life back at the Siege of Relius, as they fought back to back. At another battle, Horus repaid this debt when he hacked off the arm of a frenzied orc as it tried to choke the life out of the Emperor on the planet of Goro. The first of his brother Primarchs Horus was reunited with was Leman Russ, who he regretted meeting as he saw Russ as a savage and with a degree of hidden jealousy. Despite this, he fervently followed the Emperor's wishes to have him get along with Russ and the other Primarchs that will soon be rediscovered. As the Emperor and the Great Crusade marched on, Horus proved himself to be a tactical genius. He knew precisely which force to send and where to send it, showing no mercy to those that opposed the Emperor, but sparing the innocent from unnecessary bloodshed. As the Emperor departed to find and meet with the rediscovered Primarchs, Horus was left in temporary command of the Legiones Astartes, and this helped prepare him for the role of War Master. After the Ulanor Crusade, in which an Orc Empire was defeated, the Emperor, considering the Crusade to be Horus's greatest victory yet, saw fit to partially transfer control of the Great Crusade to Horus, raising him to the rank of War Master, the highest official beneath the Emperor himself, and granting him command over any and all Imperial forces, as well to the other rights and honors. This strained Horus's relationship with several Primarchs, most notably Angron, Perturabo, and Conrad Kurz, who felt either they deserved the title or simply didn't wish to take orders from their brother. Lehman Russ and Lionel Johnson, meanwhile, openly accepted the decision, but were clearly embittered by it. Rabute Gilliman, Jagatai Khan, and Ferris Manus supported the decision simply because of duty, but Fulgrim, Mortarion, Sanguinius, Lorgar, and Rogel Dorn all supported Horus's ascension to the point where they bowed their heads and meant it, and Horus grew closest to these brothers. In these, the last years of the Great Crusade, Horus would encourage the other Primarchs to compete against each other in order to discover the strongest and most able of his companions and to improve their fighting abilities, as well as lead his own personal forces into several notable campaigns. It was after one of these campaigns, the first contact with the Interrex, that Horus chose to exercise his right, granted by the Emperor, to rename his personal legion, and the Lunar Wolves were renamed the Sons of Horus. But despite these accomplishments, the formation of the Council of Terra and his father's return to Terra created a deeply buried resentment in Horus that, before the heresy, not even he truly seemed to realize existed. Unknown to Horus, his brother Lorgar, along with his entire legion of word-bearers, had secretly fallen to chaos and conspired to make Horus the ruinous power's champion against the Emperor. For many years before acting openly, the word-bearers usurped loyalist holds on their legions by establishing warrior lodges, secret fraternities that would soon make up the traitor legions. The full conspiracy finally manifested during a mission on the feral world Davin, as Horus was wounded in battle by a blade of Nurgle wielded by the chaos-corrupted Yugen Temba. Horus fell unconscious, and under the advice of Wordbearer's first chaplain Erebus, the natives of the world helped to heal him. However, unknown to the desperate Mournival, a group of people Horus looked to for advice, the healers and Erebus himself had all long since become corrupted by chaos and were orchestrating the entire series of events. Having his dying body moved to the Serpent Lodge, Horus was soon subjected to an ancient chaos ritual by the Davin priests, while Erebus entered his mind disguised as the deceased Hastur Sejanus. The image of Sejanus showed Horus horrifying visions of the future, where the Emperor ruled as a god and discarded the Primarchs once they had outlived their usefulness. Erebus also told Horus that the gods of chaos were peaceful beings with little interest in the Imperium, and it was in the Emperor that was intent on destroying their realm on his quest for godhood. Most disturbing for Horus, he was told that the Emperor had used the powers of the warp to create the Primarchs. Horus was shown a vision of the past where all the Primarchs, himself included, were scattered across the galaxy into a warp vortex. The scattering of the Primarchs, despite being orchestrated by chaos instead of the Emperor, simply confirmed to Horus the Emperor had used foul warp magics in his son's creations. Horus saw the Emperor, who had banned any research into the warp, as a hypocrite upon realizing early on that this Sejanus was nothing but an impostor. Horus nonetheless accepted these revelations, and his bitterness towards the Emperor, already growing from his father's isolation and secret project on Terra, as well as the formation of the Council of Terra, finally manifested in outright hostility. The only attempt to stop this conversion of Horus came from his brother Magnus the Red, who entered Horus's mind, but was not able to interfere with the powerful rituals of the Devon cultists, or convinced Horus to remain loyal to the Emperor. Horus dealt with Magnus afterwards by manipulating Leman Russ into launching an all-out purge of Prospero. After his experience on Devon, Horus agreed to align with the powers of chaos in order to overthrow the Emperor, which he had become convinced was a corrupt dictator bent on achieving godhood and forsaking his sons in favor of mortal rulers. The War Master soon introduced the talent to the Legion under his direct command, converting Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Mortarion of the Death God to his cause. Eventually, Horus was also able to secretly recruit Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords, Alfarius Omegon of the Alpha Legion, and Perturabo of the Iron Warriors. Horus also converted Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Kelbor Hall, founding the Dark Mechanicum, as well as many units of the Imperial Army. At the start of the heresy, Horus moved, along with several other secretly traitor legions, to Istvan III, seemingly in order to suppress the rebellion and reinstate Imperial control. Once he arrived, however, he sent down specially selected troops from all 4 legions with him, sending down all those he knew would never join him in open rebellion. Once they were on the planet, he proceeded to virus bomb the entire world and kill the billions of inhabitants in seconds, along with hundreds of space marines, and a ground war eliminated the remainder. The psychic shockwave from this event was said to be louder than the Astronomicon. Horus then redeployed his forces to Istvan V, where he was met by 7 Space Marine legions sent to bring him to Terra to face an inquest of his actions on Istvan III. 4 of these 7 legions proceeded to rebel against the Emperor. It became obvious that Horus had massive sway as he hunted down 3 legions that had stayed loyal. Only a few Space Marines managed to escape his forces and make it back to Terra, and among those killed was Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands. Eventually, Horus would mount the skull of Ferrus Manus in his throne room, where he began talking to it in private and lamenting that he must rely on psychotic generals and demons instead of true, effective strategists like Ferrus had been. As Horus's rebellion spread, he claimed to have a personal fiefdom in the Northern Imperium dubbed the Dark Empire, following a failed assassination attempt by Shadrach Medusan. After the Battle of Dwell, Horus regained a lost memory that the Emperor had erased. That the Emperor's unlocking of dark powers on Molech. Horus invaded the planet hoping to gain the same abilities as his father. Horus eventually managed to enter the gate, and after an unspecified but extremely long period of time, exited the warp with his powers greatly increased. While time in the Materium had only been mere moments, Horus had been within the warp for so long, he had visibly aged. Inside the warp for what seemed like an eternity, Horus had won 1,000 kingdoms, amassed billions of demonic followers, and even defied gods. Eventually, Horus forcibly acquired the same power the Emperor had gotten, but with his own force of will and without deception like his father had. However, he had refused to place within the warp, choosing instead to re-enter the Materium with his new power and make war on the Emperor. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Horus then survives an infiltration by the Knights Errant, led by his former Mournival advisor, Garvio Loken. The attempt failed, and Horus killed Eacton Cruz before the Knights Errant escaped. Now with the powers of a god, and maintaining his previously youthful appearance with his newfound abilities, Horus then set a course to fight his way through the Imperium in an attempt to reach Terra, and ultimately to kill the Emperor and place himself on the throne. However, at the Trisolian, he was confronted by Leman Russ and his Space Wolves, who had tracked the Vengeful Spirit thanks to runes planted by the Knights Errant during the Battle of Molech. Russ and a large force of Space Wolves were able to board the Vengeful Spirit, and the 2 Primarchs came face to face. Russ was disgusted by what had become of his brother. Nonetheless, Horus pleaded with Russ to join him in his help to overthrow the Emperor and expose his lies. Surprising none, Russ rejected Horus and the two engaged in a titanic battle. Despite Horus's sorcerer's powers, Russ was protected thanks to the spear of Russ he wielded. It thus came down to a battle of sheer power. One Horus was dominating, despite Russ's speed. Horus caught Russ upon his talon, but Russ broke free of his armor and impaled flesh to plunge the spear of Russ into the Warmaster's side. However, Russ hesitated at the final second to deliver the killing blow, and instead only partially pierced Horus's side. The wound was still devastating, and more importantly, the power of the spear cleansed Horus of the corruption that had befallen him since Molech. For the first time in the battle, Russ saw Horus Lupercal before him, not the creature of chaos. Despite the effects of the spear, Horus remained committed to the Emperor's destruction and rejected Russ's offer to return to Terra and allow the Emperor to heal him. The two Primarchs again came to blows, and this time Russ was badly mauled by Horus's talon as Horus stood over Russ and was about to deliver the final blow with Worldbreaker. A single space wolf rushed to his Primarch's aid and was swatted aside by Horus. Soon, more came, and then hundreds, until Horus was swarmed by a desperate mob of space wolves piling upon him. The distraction gave Bjorn enough time to drag Russ back to the flagship Hrafnkel and escape. After the battle, Horus ordered Abaddon to pursue the wolves to Yarent, but secretly expressed regrets that so much blood had been spilled in his war. The wound Russ gave Horus proved far more enduring than any could imagine, constantly plaguing the Warmaster. At the Battle of Beta Garmin, the wound reopened and Horus collapsed into a coma-like state. Before he passed out, Horus demanded that Malgahurst issue a general summons to all the traitor Primarchs to Ulanor in preparation for moving in Terra. Despite his best efforts of Malgahurst to hold the traitor war effort together, without Horus's power, things began to fall apart. Fulgrim and Angron refused the summons entirely, while Mortarion stated that he would only take the summons from Horus himself, with Abaddon busy chasing the wolves at the Battle of Yarent. Horus Aximand and Fulgus Kyber vied for leadership and undermined Malgahurst's authority. Malgahurst, in desperation, turned to Lorgar and Zardu Lyak to revive the Warmaster. The Wordbearers revealed that part of Horus's soul was still trapped within the gate of Molech, and the Chaos Gods were literally tearing it apart in their squabbles over such a valuable prize. The majority of Horus's spirit refused to submit to the Dark Gods, and this combined with the doubt created by the Spear of Russ had created his comatose state. With the sons of Horus facing destruction at Haida Gladius under the leadership of Aximand, and Malgahurst conducted a blood ritual with the bound demon Amarok to journey into the warp and attempt to recover the lost piece of Horus's soul. Inside, he found Horus on an eternal battlefield, waging a never-ending struggle against enemies and creatures from across time and space. This Horus thought he was still on Molech and was unaware of what had transpired since. Malgahurst revealed the truth and bade Horus to go with him. Horus refused to submit to the gods and free his soul from this realm, but Malgahurst attempted the ritual a second time. This time, the two found themselves on Ulanor, on the eve of the triumph. Malgahurst begged Horus to submit to the gods, but the Warmaster refused to be a slave. Malgahurst noted that Horus had chose this path and was no slave, and it was far too late to turn back now. The Warmaster must settle things with the Emperor and end the war. This time, Malgahurst understood what must be done and plunged a knife into Horus's wound, with Malgahurst giving his own life to awaken the Warmaster. Horus awoke and immediately took command of the Legion once more. With Horus renewed, he traveled to the surface of Ulanor to meet with the traitor Primarchs that had already arrived. On the surface, he met Fulgrim and Lorgar. In truth, Lorgar had planned to usurp Horus's Warmaster, as he viewed him as weak and undeserving of the title. Before Lorgar's coup could be enacted, Horus revealed that he knew of his treachery thanks to the efforts of Akatea. With the previously enslaved Fulgrim being freed by Zardu Lyak, Lorgar's plan fell apart completely. Horus beat Lorgar viciously and exiled him, ordering that he never enter his sight again. but retaining command of the word-bearers of Zardu-Lyak. Before leaving, Lorgar revealed his sadness for Horus. He had become such a slave to chaos that even he pitied him. According to Lyak, by this point, Horus's form was consistently shifting between various states. His pure, lunar wolf form, and that of the War Master, that of the empowered Migan Molech, and finally his new form that was simply a dark maw of chaotic energy. Horus had finally thrown away the last of Lupercal. All that existed was a slave to darkness. Horus then met up with the other Primarchs that had arrived on Ulanor: Perturabo, Angron, Alfarius, and Magnus. A second, darker triumph on Ulanor was held as the traitors allayed their forces. After sacrificing a tenth of their slaves to the gods, Horus ordered all to move to Terra at last. Horus's forces at last arrived in the Sol System in the Solar War. However, during the initial phases of the battle, neither he or the Vengeful Spirit appeared, and this led to much grim speculation by Roklodorn, Malkador, and the others as to his true intent. Their suspicions were proven correct when a ritual conducted by Armin and the word-bearers aboard the comet created a massive warp rift directly over Luna, from which spilled tens of thousands of warships. At the head of the armada was the Vengeful Spirit, with Horus himself commanding from Lupercal's court. Beset on all sides, the defenses of the Sol System collapsed, and Horus was able to strike directly towards Terra. But as Horus besieged the Sol System and the Materium, so did the ruinous powers assail the Imperium and the Immaterium. The Emperor alone held back the tides of the warp from the Sol System. As Horus finally arrived in the Sol System, he appeared to the Emperor as a feral wolf, goading the Emperor and declaring him a tyrant and liar. The Emperor refused to even respond to Horus in these exchanges, looking past him to instead announce his rejection of the ruinous powers and declaring their puppet as nothing. As the embers of his fire died, the shadows around him drew closer and closer. As Horus arrived directly over Terra, the fire finally died, and Horus gloated that the only option left for his father was to run. Horus's war came to its climax at the siege of Terra. During the siege, he was increasingly absent from direct command, something that frustrated First Captain Abaddon. Instead, Horus spent large amounts of time inside the pocket dimension that had become Lupercal's court, accompanied by Zardu-Lyak and his word-bearers. Here, he would fall into a comatose state, scanning the Imperium for lore and weakening the Emperor upon their psychic battlefield within the warp. Horus swelled with the powers of the Chaos Gods and uncommanded through fear rather than charisma. Abaddon began to become disgusted with what Horus had become, considering him now to be more than little a slave to the Chaos Gods. Zardu-Lyak stated while supremely powerful, the Chaos Gods would quickly burn out Horus with their power, and he had a limited time left to live. Lyak's prophecy rang true, as a few months into the siege, Horus had begun to display signs of senility. He recalled past glories as if they were presently occurring, and called out his current emissary Argonis by the name of Malkahos. Horus was kept recluse from the traitor armies, and much of the day-to-day planning in the siege fell to Perturabo. After the setback at the Saturnine Wall, however, Horus became more directly active in the siege's execution. He ordered Perturabo to use the Legio Mortis to attack the Mercury Exalted Kill Zone, despite its formidable defenses. When Perturabo expressed doubt in the plan, Horus was adamant it would succeed, because it willed it so. Later, Horus had Argonis inform Perturabo that the Iron Warriors to be dispersed across various war fronts, and that the Lord of Iron's own position would be taken by Mortarion and the Death God. The act caused the already disillusioned Perturabo to quit the war effort. Horus remained aboard the Vengeful Spirit until the final stages of the siege, where he apparently had begun to prepare for his landing to kill the Emperor personally. Horus issued his first direct command, not given through Argonis in weeks, when he ordered traitor forces to capture the Eternity Gate. Horus then psychically ordered Angron to find and kill Sanguinius, an act apparently more out of desperation than anything else. After much fighting, death and betrayal, Horus realized he would have to hurry his attacks in order to secure Terra in time for him to set the defenses sufficiently to prevent the arrival of 2 loyal Space Marine legions, which could potentially turn the balance back in favor of the Emperor. To this end, Horus ordered the void shields of his flagship dropped to entice the Emperor aboard for one final conflict. Somehow, the Loyalist forces arrived, scattered throughout the ship, and Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, appeared before Horus, who offered him riches and power if he denounced his allegiance to the Emperor. Sanguinius refused and attacked. Horus killed him and was found standing over his broken body when the Emperor entered the chamber. The Emperor and Horus fought with a power that would have eviscerated any mortal man dozens of times over with each blow. The Emperor held back for much of the battle, remembering Horus as his beloved son, and not wishing to believe that he had turned so utterly to chaos. This allowed Horus to inflict crippling mortal wounds on the Emperor, since nothing short of the Emperor's full power would be sufficient to defeat him. At the critical point in the battle, a lone Adeptus Custodes guard entered the room, while others state the lone warrior to be Elenius Pius, an Imperial army soldier. Horus flayed the soldier alive, but with a look, and in an instant, the Emperor realized how far his favorite son had fallen. The sacrifice of the individual bought the Emperor time to deliver a finishing blow to Horus. With iron resolve, he gathered his full strength and delivered a massive psychic blow that killed Horus and almost instantly obliterated his very soul. In his final moments, the powers of chaos were driven from him, and the Emperor sensed his favorite son's return to sanity for a fraction of a second before he finally died. After the battle where Horus died, the warship was won back by the forces of chaos led by Ezekiel Abaddon, captain of the First Company. Abaddon found Horus's body and ordered the retreat into the Eye of Terror. The body of Horus is said to have been put on display in a temple, the sons of Horus revering the War Master even in death. At the end of a series of inner traitor wars, the fortress of the sons of Meliam was destroyed, and the body of Horus stolen by the Emperor's children. To the disgust of the sons, the body was used by Fabius Bile to create at least one clone of Horus. Ultimately, Abaddon returned to lead forces to destroy the Emperor's children fortress and the clone of Horus with it. At the climax of the battle, Abaddon, wielding the talon of Horus, confronted the clone of Horus, who was armed with Worldbreaker. After killing scores of Abaddon's allies, the clone of Horus caught sight of the talon of Horus worn by another. Horus's clone lashed out at Abaddon with Worldbreaker, but the first captain caught it with the talon. Worldbreaker was crushed, and Horus's clone impaled by Abaddon. In its dying moments, the clone of Horus remembered who Abaddon was, and acknowledged him as his son. By the time of the Heresy, Horus was equipped with the gigantic power Maul Worldbreaker, said to be constructed by the Emperor's own hands. His right arm wielded the Talon of Horus, a monstrous power claw constructed for him as a gift by the Dark Mechanicum's fabricator general, Kelbor Hull. Originally, Horus fought with a power sword and twin-linked bolter. Horus wore an enormous suit of Terminator armor known as the Serpent Scales. This concludes the information regarding Horus. More in-depth information regarding him will be recorded at a later date. This is Librarian Elias, signing